all living things have one major thing in common, including these koalas, the bacteria, the plant, these mushrooms, and my Uncle Noel. At a microscopic level, they all consist of cells, which are the smallest unit of life that can function independently. The study of cells began in 1660 when English physicist Robert Hooke melted strands of glass to create his own microscope, with which he was able to magnify and focus on bee stingers, fish scales, fly legs, feathers, and any type of insect he could get to hold still. When he looked at cork, which is bark from a type of oak tree, it appeared to be divided into little boxes left by cells that were once alive, and Hooke called these units cells because they looked like cubicles where monks used to study and pray. Hooke didn't really realise the significance of his discovery, but he'd basically initiated a new field of science, which is now called cell biology. In 1673, Antony van Leeuwenhoek of Holland improved lenses further. He used only a single lens in this very peculiar-looking microscope, but actually produced a clearer and more highly magnified image than most two-lens microscopes then available. One of the first things he actually looked at under his microscope was the tartar he scraped off from his own teeth, and made an amazing discovery of bacteria which no one had ever seen before. He also documented other human cells with quite remarkable accuracy, including many red blood cells and sperm cells. In the 19th century, more powerful microscopes with improved magnification and illumination revealed details of structures inside cells. In the early 1830s, a Scottish surgeon by the name of Robert Brown noted a roughly circular object in cells from orchid plants. He saw this structure in every cell, then identified it in cells of a variety of organisms. He called it the nucleus, which is a name that stuck to this day. Soon, other scientists distinguished the translucent moving material that made up the rest of the cell, and they called it the cytoplasm. In 1839, German biologists Matthias Schleiden and Theodor Schwann proposed a new theory. Based on the observations they'd made with microscopes, Schleiden actually first noticed that cells were the basic units of all plants, and then Schwann compared animal cells to plant cells. After observing many similarities in different plant and animal cells, they basically concluded that cells were the elementary particles of organisms, and they proposed something called the cell theory, or at least the first two parts of the cell theory, which originally had two main components. The cell is the basic unit of life. In other words, it doesn't matter whether you're a bacteria or a koala or a mushroom or a plant, your basic component is made up of cells. And secondly, that all living organisms are composed of cells. They can either be unicellular, like bacteria, uni meaning one, made of one cell, or multicellular, in other words, made of many, many cells, like us, like humans. After that, German physiologist Rudolf Virchow added a third component to the cell theory in 1855 when he proposed that all cells came from pre-existing cells. Now this sounds like a sort of logical thing for us today, but it basically flew in the face of what was called the theory of spontaneous generation, in which people believe that rather than animals and plants and organisms being created through reproduction, they basically were created from non-living things or came to existence out of basically thin air. The existence of cells is an undisputed fact, yet the cell theory is still evolving. For 150 years after its formulation, biologists focused on documenting the parts of the cell and the processes of cell division. Since the discovery of DNA's structure and functions in the 1950s, however, the cell theory is focused on the role of genetic information in dictating what happens inside cells. Modern cell theory therefore adds the ideas that all cells have the same basic chemical composition, use energy, and contain DNA that is duplicated and passed on as cells divide. And these are the main focuses of the remainder of this course.